My wife said, "If you don't trust me working late night with my boss every day, maybe we shouldn't be together." I replied, "You're absolutely right." Then I accepted the job transfer to New York I'd been declining for her. When she texted, "What are you doing this weekend?" I sent a selfie from John F. Kennedy International Airport. For years, that's how long I'd been married to Julia, and let me tell you, I thought we had our shit together. Sure, we weren't some fairy tale couple posting Instagram stories every 5 minutes about our perfect love, but we were solid. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself while watching my wife transform into someone I barely recognized. It all started innocently enough, or so I thought, because apparently I'm about as sharp as a bowling ball when it comes to reading the obvious signs. Julia landed this new position at her marketing firm, working directly under Adrian, this hotshot executive who looked like he stepped out of a men's health magazine cover. The guy had that whole, "I definitely use product in my hair and own more than 3 suits" vibe going on. But hey, good for her, right? Career advancement and all that American dream bullshit. The first few late nights seemed legit. Big presentation coming up, client demands. The usual corporate circus that keeps the lights on and the mortgage paid. Julia would come home around 9, maybe 10, looking tired but talking animatedly about strategy sessions and brainstorming marathons with Adrian. I'd heat up her dinner, pour her a glass of wine, and listen to her decompress. Supportive husband material right there. I should have gotten a damn medal. But then 9 became 10. 10 became 11. 11 became, "Don't wait up. Honey, we're really in the zone here." And suddenly, every single project at her company apparently required round-the-clock attention from my wife and her dreamy boss. What were they doing over there? Solving world hunger? Curing cancer? Nope, just selling overpriced skincare products to suburban moms. But apparently that required more dedication than NASA's moon landing. The changes were subtle at first, which is probably why it took my dense ass so long to connect the dots. Julia started paying attention to her appearance in ways she hadn't since we were dating. New dresses that never saw the inside of our apartment, let alone a dinner date with me. Perfume that smelled expensive and definitely wasn't the stuff I bought her last Christmas. Hair appointments every 2 weeks like clockwork. She looked amazing, don't get me wrong, but it stung like hell knowing none of that effort was for the guy sharing her bed. The worst part? Those late-night Uber rides home. I'd hear her phone buzz with notifications, see Adrian's name pop up with messages like, "Car's here," or "Thanks for staying late again." Real professional stuff, clearly. Nothing suspicious about your married employee's boss personally arranging her transportation at midnight, right? I mean, what kind of paranoid psycho would read anything into that? My friends started giving me those looks. You know the ones, part pity, part dude, seriously? Clara, Julia's co-worker and supposedly one of her closest friends, would get this uncomfortable expression whenever I'd casually ask if the whole team was pulling these marathon hours. "Oh, well, you know how it is with big projects," she'd stammer, avoiding eye contact like I'd asked her to solve calculus. Real convincing, "Clara, your poker face needs work." Even my brother Daniel, who usually minded his own business and stuck to safe topics like sports and complaining about his ex-wife's alimony payments, felt compelled to stage an intervention. We were grabbing beers after work one Thursday, and he just laid it out there with all the subtlety of a freight train. "Marcus, you're blind if you don't see what's happening." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, though my stomach was already dropping like a stone. "Come on, man. Julie is working late every night with Prince Charming, coming home looking like she stepped off a runway, and you're sitting here acting like this is normal? Wake up." But I didn't want to wake up. I wanted to be the cool, trusting husband who didn't turn into some paranoid stalker, checking phone records and demanding receipts. I wanted to believe that my wife of 4 years wouldn't throw away everything we'd built for some office romance novel fantasy. I wanted to trust that the woman who promised to love and honor me meant those words. So I played the part. Smiled when she kissed me goodbye before another emergency strategy session. Nodded understandingly when she explained how Adrian really valued her input on the Johnson account. Pretended not to notice when she started keeping her phone face down during dinner, or how she'd suddenly developed an urgent need to shower the moment she walked through the door. The excuses kept piling up like dirty laundry. Client emergencies that only she could handle. presentations that required her specific expertise until well past normal human bedtime, team building exercises that apparently happened at 11 p.m. on weeknights. It was like watching someone construct an elaborate house of cards, each lie balanced precariously on the last, waiting for the inevitable collapse. Meanwhile, I'm the chump heating up leftovers alone, watching Netflix by myself, going to bed in an empty house, because my wife is apparently the only person in the tri-state area capable of handling whatever crisis Adrian's company was perpetually facing. The loneliness was eating me alive, but I kept telling myself this was temporary. Just a busy season. Things would go back to normal once this project wrapped up. Except there was always another project. Another deadline. Another reason why Adrian absolutely needed Julia's undivided attention at hours when most people were home with their families, walking their dogs, or doing literally anything that didn't involve cozying up with their boss in an empty office building. I should have trusted my gut. Should have listened to Daniel, to Clara's awkward stammering, to every red flag waving in my face like a matador's cape. But love makes you stupid, and hope makes you stubborn. I kept believing because the alternative. Accepting that my marriage was a joke and my wife was playing house with another man was too painful to process. For years of marriage, and this is what it came down to. Me, alone in our apartment, wondering if the woman I'd promised my life to was ever coming home. While my wife was busy playing corporate Cinderella with Prince Adrian, I was getting my own fairy tale offer. Except this one actually involved real money and didn't require me to pretend I was blind. Harold Peterson, my boss for the past 3 years and a straight shooter who looked like he'd stepped out of a 1950s business manual, had been dangling this New York opportunity in front of me like a carrot on a stick. The first time he brought it up was during one of our quarterly reviews, right around the time Julia's late nights were becoming a regular Tuesday through Thursday affair. Harold leaned back in his leather chair, the kind that probably cost more than my car payment, and dropped the bomb with characteristic bluntness. Marcus, I'm going to cut to the chase here. Corporate wants you in Manhattan. Regional director position, overseeing the entire East Coast operation. We're talking a 70% salary bump, company apartment overlooking Central Park, full relocation package, and enough responsibility to make your head spin in the best possible way. I nearly choked on my coffee. 70%? That wasn't just a raise. That was life-changing money. The kind of cash that could pay off our student loans, maybe even let us think about buying instead of renting. But before I could even process the numbers, my brain went straight to Julia mode. That's incredible, Harold, but my wife's got her career here. Her family's all local, and she's really building something with her current company. The words came out automatically, like some kind of programmed response. Good husband Marcus, always putting his wife's needs first, even when she was probably planning her next late-night strategy session with Mr. Perfect Hair. Harold gave me this look, part disappointment, part, are you kidding me right now? He'd been in corporate long enough to recognize when someone was making excuses, and he wasn't buying my supportive spouse routine. Marcus, let me be clear about something. Opportunities like this don't grow on trees. Hell, they don't even grow in greenhouses with perfect conditions and daily fertilizing. This is the kind of position people spend decades working toward, and they're offering it to you at 32. You sure you want to pass this up for someone else's comfort zone? But I did pass it up. Like an absolute champion of self-sabotage, I smiled, shook his hand, and told him I was flattered but couldn't make that kind of move right now. Harold looked like I'd just told him I preferred root canals to promotions, but he nodded and said he'd keep the position open for a few weeks, just in case I came to my senses. That night, I went home to an empty apartment. Shocking, I know, and tried to imagine telling Julia about the offer. In my fantasy version, she'd be excited, maybe even proud that her husband was being headhunted for such a prestigious role. We'd spend the evening talking about our future, about the adventures we could have in the city, about how this could be the fresh start we didn't even know we needed. Reality, of course, had other plans. Julia strolled in at 11:47 p.m. looking like she'd been styled by a team of professionals, smelling like expensive perfume and somebody else's cologne. When I mentioned the New York opportunity, carefully, like I was defusing a bomb, she barely looked up from her phone. That's nice, honey, but you know I can't just abandon everything I've built here. My career is finally taking off, and Adrian says I have real potential for advancement. Plus, Mom would literally have a heart attack if we moved that far away. Adrian says. Those two words were starting to make my eye twitch. When did my wife's boss become the oracle of career wisdom? When did his opinions start mattering more than her husband's once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? A month later, Harold approached me again. This time, he wasn't taking no for an answer quite so gracefully. Marcus, I'm going to be straight with you because I like you, and I'd hate to see you make a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. The company is restructuring. This New York position? It's not just a promotion anymore, it's a lifeboat. The regional offices are consolidating, which means your current role might not exist in 6 months. You can either take the golden parachute to Manhattan, or you can update your resume and hope someone else appreciates your talents as much as we do. The subtext was crystal clear. Take the job or start job hunting in a market that was about as friendly as a pack of hungry wolves. But even with that gun to my head, my first instinct was still to consider Julia's feelings. How could I uproot her life? How could I ask her to leave her blossoming career with Adrian? I mean, her marketing firm, just because my job was disappearing. I asked for another week to think it over. Harold agreed, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. He was offering me a chance to run with the big dogs, and I was acting like he'd asked me to relocate to Mars. That week was hell. Every night, Julia came home later and more distracted. Every morning, she left earlier and more dressed up. I felt like I was living with a beautiful stranger who occasionally shared my bed and split the utility bills. Meanwhile, Harold's offer sat on my mental desk like a blinking neon sign. Escape route available. Terms and conditions apply. I started doing the math. The salary bump would mean financial security I'd never experienced. The apartment in Manhattan was worth more in monthly rent than I currently made in 3 months. The career trajectory was the kind of thing that opens doors for decades. But every time I got excited about the possibilities, I'd picture Julia's face when I told her we were leaving. I'd imagine the fight, the tears, the accusations that I was being selfish and impulsive. So I turned it down a second time. Harold didn't even try to hide his disappointment. Marcus, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've never seen someone work so hard to sabotage their own success. Whatever's holding you back here, I hope it's worth sacrificing your future for, because that's exactly what you're doing. His words stuck with me like a bad song you can't get out of your head. Every time Julia texted that she'd be late again, every time she came home smelling like someone else's life, I heard Harold's voice asking if it was worth it. Every time I ate dinner alone or went to bed in an empty house, I wondered if I was the biggest fool in the tri-state area. The third time Harold approached me, I could see he was done playing games. This was his final offer, and we both knew it. The question was whether I'd finally choose myself or keep waiting for approval that was never going to come. Friday evening, the end of another week of watching my marriage dissolve in real time while I sat on the sidelines like some kind of emotional bench warmer. Julia was in our bedroom, preparing for what had become her weekly ritual, getting dolled up for another urgent project with Adrian. The sound of her hairdryer mixed with the notification pings from her phone created this perfect soundtrack of betrayal that I'd become way too familiar with. I was sitting on the couch, staring at my laptop screen where Harold's latest email sat open like a digital ultimatum. Final offer expires Monday morning. Need your decision by then. 3 months of turning down the opportunity of a lifetime because I was trying to be the supportive husband to a woman who couldn't even be bothered to lie convincingly anymore. The hair dryer shut off, and I could hear Julia moving around the bedroom with that focused energy she used to reserve for special occasions with me. Date nights, anniversaries, my birthday. Back when those things mattered to her more than whatever the hell she was doing with Prince Adrian every night after normal humans went home to their families. She emerged from the bedroom looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Black dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. A dress I'd never seen before, naturally. Hairstyled in those loose waves that took her an hour to perfect. Makeup that could have been done by a professional. And that perfume, the expensive stuff that definitely wasn't in our bathroom cabinet. You look nice, I said, testing the waters. Hot date with Adrian again. She didn't even flinch. Just checked her reflection in the hallway mirror and adjusted her earrings like I'd asked about the weather. It's not a date, Marcus. It's work. Some of us take our careers seriously. That little dig hit exactly where she intended it to. Some of us take our careers seriously. like I was some slacker who'd been coasting through life while she climbed the corporate ladder one late-night meeting at a time. Actually, speaking of careers, I said, closing my laptop and standing up, I was thinking maybe we could grab dinner tonight. There's that new Italian place on 5th Street you mentioned wanting to try. We could talk about some changes coming up at my job. Julia's phone buzzed. Adrian's name lit up the screen with a text that probably said something earth-shattering like "cars outside" or "ready when you are." She glanced at it, then at me, and I watched her face cycle through emotions like she was running diagnostics. "Marcus, Adrian needs me tonight. This Johnson account presentation is Monday, and if we don't nail this, it could cost the company the contract. I can't just abandon my responsibilities because you suddenly want to play house." Play house. That's what she called me, wanting to have dinner with my own wife. My marriage had officially become a game of house, and apparently, I was the only one still playing. "Julia, you've been working late every single night for 3 months. Weekends too. When exactly are we supposed to spend time together? When am I supposed to matter in this marriage?" She rolled her eyes, like I was being some kind of needy child asking for attention during grown-up time. "Marcus, this is what success looks like. If you don't trust me to work late with my boss, if you can't handle me having a demanding career, then maybe we shouldn't be together." There it was. The nuclear option, delivered with all the casualness of someone ordering coffee. Maybe we shouldn't be together. She said it like it was my fault, like my inability to trust her midnight office marathons with Mr. Perfect Hair was the problem in our relationship. I felt something shift inside me, like a switch being flipped or a door being slammed shut. For months, I've been twisting myself into knots trying to be understanding, trying to support her career growth, trying to ignore every red flag waving in my face like a matador's cape. I'd been so busy being the perfect, trusting husband that I'd forgotten I had other options. "You know what, Julia?" I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "You're absolutely right." She blinked, clearly expecting me to backpedal into apologies and reassurances. The smile that started spreading across her face was pure satisfaction. She thought she'd won. Thought she'd successfully guilt-tripped me back into my role as the compliant husband who didn't ask uncomfortable questions. "We shouldn't be together," I continued, watching that smile freeze like a glitch in a video game. Her phone buzzed again. Adrian, no doubt, wondering where his favorite employee was. But for once, Julia wasn't reaching for it immediately. She was staring at me like I'd just started speaking Mandarin. "What did you just say?" I said, "You're right. If I can't trust my wife working until midnight every night with her boss, if I'm such a burden to your career success, then we definitely shouldn't be together." I pulled out my phone, found Harold's email, and hit reply. My fingers moved across the keyboard with more certainty than I'd felt in months. "Harold, I'll take the New York position. Can start in 2 weeks. Thanks for your patience." The send notification sounded like a gunshot in the silence of our apartment. Julia's face went through several expressions at once: confusion, disbelief, anger, and something that might have been panic. "Marcus, what are you doing?" "I'm taking a job in New York. Regional director, 70% salary increase, company apartment in Manhattan. Remember? The opportunity one turned down twice because I thought my wife's happiness was more important than my career." Her phone buzzed a third time. This time, she didn't even glance at it. "You can't be serious. You're going to throw away 4 years of marriage because you're having some kind of jealous breakdown?" "I'm not throwing anything away, Julia. You already did that. I'm just finally accepting reality instead of pretending that my marriage isn't a joke and my wife isn't screwing her boss. I am not. Save it. We both know what's happening here. The only difference is that I'm finally done pretending I don't know." Her phone rang. Adrian's ringtone. She'd given him his own special sound, because of course she had. She stared at it like it might explode, then looked back at me with something approaching desperation. "Marcus, you're being ridiculous. You can't just..." "I can and I am. Have fun at your meeting tonight. Try not to work too hard." I walked into the bedroom, pulled out my suitcase, and started packing. Behind me, I could hear Julia's phone ringing again, could hear her frantic whispered conversation with Adrian, could hear the reality of her choices finally crashing down around her. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The sound of my suitcase zipper cutting through the silence was like a period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. 4 years of marriage, and it all came down to this. Me folding clothes while my wife had a panicked phone conversation with her boss/side piece in the living room. Adrian, I can't come tonight. Marcus is. He's lost his mind. He's packing. He says he's moving to New York. Her voice carried that edge of hysteria that people get when their carefully constructed house of lies starts collapsing in real time. I kept folding. Shirts, pants, the good suit I'd bought for our anniversary dinner last year. The one where Julia spent half the evening checking her phone for urgent work messages. Everything fit surprisingly well into 2 suitcases, which probably said something depressing about how little I'd accumulated during our marriage, or maybe how ready I was to leave it all behind. Julia's conversation with Adrian continued in hushed, frantic tones. I caught bits and pieces. No, you can't come over here. He knows, Adrian. I think he knows. This is a disaster. Yeah, it was a disaster, all right. Just not for the reasons she thought. I moved to the bathroom, grabbing my toothbrush, shampoo, the electric razor she bought me for Christmas because apparently my face wasn't meeting her standards anymore. Funny how all these little details suddenly made sense when viewed through the lens of my wife is cheating on me with her boss. By the time I emerged from the bathroom, Julia had hung up and was standing in the bedroom doorway looking like someone had just told her Santa Claus was a lie and the Easter Bunny had gambling debts. Marcus, stop. Just stop for a minute and think about what you're doing. I am thinking. For the first time in months, actually. Turns out my brain works a lot better when I'm not trying to convince myself that my marriage isn't a complete sham. She stepped into the room, her perfect hair slightly mussed from running her hands through it, her makeup starting to smudge around the edges. The transformation from magazine cover gorgeous to desperate housewife was almost impressive in its speed. You can't just throw away 4 years like this. Over what? Some paranoid delusion that I'm cheating on you. Paranoid delusion? I laughed, and it came out harsher than I intended. Julia, you've been working until midnight every single night for 3 months. You dress like you're going to Fashion Week just to sit in conference rooms. You smell like men's cologne when you come home, and your boss personally arranges your late-night transportation. If this is a delusion, it's the most logical one in history. Adrian is my mentor. He's helping me advance my career. God, Marcus, why can't you just trust me? Trust. She wanted me to trust her while she was doing everything short of sending me a PowerPoint presentation titled, How I'm Cheating on My Husband for Dummies. Because trust goes both ways, Julia, and you haven't given me a single reason to trust you in months. Hell, you haven't even tried to be subtle about it. I zipped up the second suitcase and set it next to the first one. 2 bags. 4 years of marriage reduced to 2 pieces of luggage and a growing sense of relief that scared me with its intensity. Where are you even going to stay tonight? Hotel. Harold's arranging temporary housing until the company apartment is ready. Harold knew about this? Harold's been trying to save my career while you've been destroying my marriage. Yeah, he knew. Julia's phone buzzed again. Adrian, no doubt, wondering if the coast was clear for their regularly scheduled programming. She glanced at it, then back at me, and I watched the exact moment she realized she had to choose between dealing with her imploding marriage and keeping her boss happy. She chose her boss. Of course she did. I have to. Adrian's waiting, and this presentation really is important. Sure it is. Don't let me keep you from your very important work. She grabbed her purse, checked her reflection in the mirror one more time, and headed for the door. But she stopped at the threshold, turning back with what I assumed was supposed to be her final guilt trip. Marcus, I'll cut back on the late nights if it bothers you so much. We can work this out. You don't have to run away to New York. Run away. Like I was some scared kid fleeing the scene instead of a grown man making a strategic career move while escaping a toxic marriage. Julia, the only thing that bothers me is that you think I'm stupid enough to believe your lies. Have fun with Adrian tonight. Try to keep it professional. She left, actually walked out the door to go spend the evening with her boss while her husband packed up his life and prepared to move across the country. The symbolism was so perfect it almost hurt. I called a locksmith. 24-hour service, because apparently there's a market for people who need to change their locks on a Friday night. Guy showed up an hour later, took one look at my suitcases and the general vibe of domestic apocalypse, and got to work without asking questions. Probably wasn't his first marriage-ending lock change. While he worked, I packed up Julia's stuff. not out of spite. Well, not entirely out of spite, but because the lease was in my name, and I wasn't interested in being her storage facility while she figured out her next move. Her clothes, her books, her collection of overpriced skincare products that apparently weren't working their magic on her conscience. Everything fit into boxes surprisingly easily. For years of shared life, and her stuff barely filled 6 cardboard containers. Made me wonder if she'd been mentally checked out of this marriage longer than I realized. My phone started buzzing around 11 p.m. Text after text from Julia, each one more desperate than the last. Marcus, this is insane. You can't just change the locks. I'm your wife. You can't kick me out of my own home. You're having a breakdown. You need help. I'll quit my job if that's what you want. Adrian means nothing to me. It's just work. Please don't throw away our marriage over a misunderstanding. You're scaring me. This isn't like you. That last one made me laugh. This isn't like you. She was right. The old Marcus would have been a doormat, would have apologized for being suspicious, would have convinced himself that midnight strategy sessions with dreamy bosses were totally normal in the modern workplace. But the old Marcus was an idiot who nearly flushed his career down the toilet for a woman who couldn't even be bothered to lie convincingly about her affair. The new Marcus was done being an idiot. Saturday morning hit me like a freight train made of regret and Red Bull. I'd spent the night at a Holiday Inn that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and broken dreams, surrounded by my hastily packed belongings and a growing pile of increasingly unhinged text messages from Julia. By 3 a.m., she'd progressed from denial to bargaining to what I could only describe as creative fiction about her relationship with Adrian. I was sitting in the hotel's lobby, nursing what had to be the world's most depressing continental breakfast coffee, when my phone rang. Noah's name popped up on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. Noah was one of those friends who somehow always knew when your life was imploding. Usually because he had connections everywhere and a talent for being in the right place at the right time to witness maximum drama. Marcus, dude, please tell me you're sitting down for this. I'm eating stale bagels in a hotel lobby at 8 in the morning. Trust me, I'm prepared for bad news. Okay, so you know my cousin Jake works at Julia's firm, right? He's in accounting, keeps to himself, but he goes to the same gym as some of the marketing guys. I felt my stomach drop somewhere around my shoes. Noah, if you're about to tell me something I don't want to hear, you need to hear this, man. Jake was at the gym yesterday, doing his usual treadmill thing, when he overhears Adrian bragging to some other douchebag about his late-night partner. And get this, he's not even trying to be subtle about it. He's talking about hotel receipts, talking about how gullible some husbands are, talking about. Stop. I set down my coffee cup before I threw it across the lobby. Just stop for a second. But Noah was on a roll, and apparently, he'd been saving this information like ammunition for exactly this moment. Marcus, there's more. Jake started paying attention after that, and these guys have been talking about you. About you specifically. Adrian's been calling you the clueless husband in group chats. There are screenshots, man. Screenshots of him mocking you for being too trusting. The hotel lobby started spinning slightly. All those nights I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid, that I was the problem, that I needed to trust my wife more. Turns out I was the punchline of some corporate asshole's joke. The faithful husband who heated up dinner while his wife was getting her back blown out by her boss. Send them to me. Marcus, send me the screenshots, Noah. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with a series of images that felt like getting punched in the soul. Group chat messages between Adrian and what looked like half the marketing department, complete with laughing crying emojis and commentary that made my skin crawl. Another late night with a married one faced with tears of joy. Does her husband actually believe the overtime story? Guy's either the most trusting man alive or the dumbest. Either way, works for me, man shrugging. Hotel receipts are tax deductible if it's for client meetings, right? Winking face. Poor bastard probably thinks she's employee of the month material. There were dozens of messages spanning weeks. Detailed jokes about my marriage, speculation about how long it would take me to figure it out, even a betting pool on whether I'd ever grow a spine and leave her. Adrian had turned my personal life into office entertainment, and apparently, everyone was having a blast watching the show. The worst part? Julia wasn't just a passive participant in this humiliation. There were screenshots of her messages too, complaining about having to keep up appearances at home, joking about how I was getting suspicious but was too nice to actually do anything about it. Marcus is asking questions about why I'm working so late. Might need to dial it back for a week or two. He wanted to go to dinner tonight, face with rolling eyes, had to pretend I cared about his day for 20 minutes before I could leave. Adrian says the Johnson account excuse is getting old. Need new material for why I can't be home before midnight. My wife, the woman I'd been married to for 4 years, the woman I'd turned down life-changing career opportunities for, had been treating our marriage like an inconvenient obstacle to her extracurricular activities. I wasn't even a person to her anymore. I was just Marcus, the annoying husband who asked too many questions and wanted too much attention. I forwarded all the screenshots to Julia with a single word, interesting. Then I turned off my phone and sat in that lobby for 2 hours, watching families check out with their luggage and their weekend plans, wondering how the hell I'd become such a joke. 4 years of marriage, and I'd been living in a sitcom where I was the bumbling husband who didn't know his wife was screwing around. Except it wasn't funny, and I was the only one who didn't know the punchline. When I finally turned my phone back on, I had 17 missed calls from Julia and about 30 text messages that started apologetic and rapidly devolved into full-scale panic. Where did you get those messages? You're taking them out of context. Adrian was just joking around. You know how guys talk. Those messages don't mean anything. You can't trust Jake. He's always been jealous of Adrian. This is invasion of privacy. You had no right to get those screenshots. I never said anything bad about you. Those messages are fake. Marcus, call me back. I'm coming to the hotel. Which hotel are you at? You can't just ignore me. I'm your wife. Adrian is nothing to me. It was just a mistake. Please don't leave me over some stupid office gossip. I love you. Doesn't that mean anything? Fine. Ignore me. But you're destroying our marriage over lies. I can't believe you're choosing strangers over your own wife. You're having a mental breakdown and you need help. This is emotional abuse. You're punishing me for having a career. The progression from panic to anger to desperation to blame was almost impressive. She'd managed to hit every stage of getting caught in a lie, complete with gaslighting and victim blaming. Classic cheater's playbook, executed with the precision of someone who'd probably been practicing these responses in case this day ever came. I deleted all the messages without responding. Let her panic. Let her wonder. Let her experience even a fraction of the uncertainty and confusion she'd been putting me through for months. My phone rang again. Julia's ringtone, the one I'd thought was cute when we were dating, now sounded like nails on a chalkboard. I sent it straight to voicemail and started packing my stuff. I had a flight to New York tomorrow, and I wasn't about to miss it for any more of Julia's creative explanations about why betraying your spouse was actually a sign of career ambition. Some bridges deserve to be burned. Sunday morning, the day of my flight to New York, I was finishing up my last-minute packing when the sound of aggressive door pounding shattered the peaceful silence of my hotel room. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of rhythmic hammering that suggested someone was either having a medical emergency or was about to star in their own episode of When Wives Attack. I already knew who it was before I opened the door. What I didn't expect was the full delegation. Julia stood front and center looking like she hadn't slept in 3 days, flanked by her mother Linda, a woman who'd never met a boundary she couldn't cross, and her sister Brooke, who had apparently been recruited as backup moral support for this little intervention. Marcus Anthony Coleman, Linda announced, using my full name like I was 10 years old and had been caught stealing cookies. We need to talk. Right now. They pushed past me into the hotel room without waiting for an invitation, which was pretty much standard operating procedure for Linda. The woman had all the subtlety of a bulldozer wearing lipstick and had never encountered a family crisis she couldn't make worse by getting involved. Nice to see you too, Linda. Brooke. I closed the door and turned to face what was clearly going to be an ambush disguised as a concerned family meeting. Julia looked terrible, which gave me a weird sense of satisfaction I probably shouldn't admit to. Her hair was unwashed, her makeup was smudged, and she was wearing the same clothes from Friday night, which meant she'd probably been camped out at her mother's place having a 36-hour meltdown about how her perfect little side piece situation had exploded in her face. Marcus, Brooke started, using her therapist voice. She was getting her master's in psychology, which apparently made her the family expert on everyone else's mental health. Julia told us you're having some kind of breakdown. Quitting your life and running away to New York isn't a normal response to marital stress. Marital stress. I almost laughed. Is that what we're calling it? Linda jumped in before I could elaborate. Young man, Julia explained everything. She's been working hard to advance her career, and instead of supporting her like a good husband should, you've been spying on her and making wild accusations. Now you're abandoning your marriage over some paranoid fantasy. Paranoid fantasy? I pulled out my phone, found the screenshots Noah had sent me, and held it up. Would you like to see the group chat where Julia's boss calls me the clueless husband while bragging about hotel receipts with my wife? The room went dead silent. Linda's mouth actually dropped open, which was the first time in 20 years I'd seen her speechless. Brooke looked like someone had just explained that everything she thought she knew about physics was wrong. Julia, meanwhile, went through about 15 different facial expressions in the span of 3 seconds before settling on righteous indignation. Those messages are taken out of context. Adrian was just what, Julia? Just joking around about screwing another man's wife? Just having a laugh about how gullible I am while you two were playing house on company time? I scrolled through the screenshots, reading aloud some of the choicest quotes. Linda's face got paler with each message, and Brooke kept glancing between me and Julia like she was watching a tennis match where someone was about to get beheaded. Poor bastard probably thinks she's employee of the month material, I read. Guy's either the most trusting man alive or the dumbest. Either way, works for me. Real professional relationship you've got there, Julia. Marcus, stop, Brooke said quietly. This is what, Brooke? Hard to hear? Uncomfortable? Yeah. Imagine how I felt living it while everyone I knew was giving me pity looks and trying to figure out how to tell me my marriage was a joke. Linda had finally found her voice again. Julia Marie, what in the hell is this? She was using her daughter's full name now, which meant someone was about to get the lecture of their life. Julia's defense strategy was predictable: deflect, minimize, blame everyone else. Mom, those messages don't mean what Marcus thinks they mean. Adrian has a twisted sense of humor, and the guys at work are immature. I never did anything wrong. Never did anything wrong. I pulled up another screenshot. Here's one where you complain about having to keep up appearances at home. Here's another where you joke about me being too nice to actually leave you. What exactly do you call that, Julia? I was venting. Everyone vents about their marriage sometimes. To their boss? The same boss you've been spending every evening with for 3 months? The same boss who's apparently been collecting hotel receipts for your client meetings? Brooke was shaking her head like she couldn't process what she was hearing. Julia, please tell me you didn't actually. I didn't do anything. Julia exploded. God, you're all acting like I committed murder. So what if Adrian and I got close? So what if we spent time together outside of work? That doesn't mean anything happened. Nothing happened. I scrolled to another screenshot. Here's Adrian talking about how the married one gives the best presentations after midnight. Here's him making jokes about soundproofing hotel rooms. What kind of client meetings require soundproofing, Julia? The silence that followed was deafening. Linda looked like someone had told her that her retirement fund had been invested in Monopoly money. Brooke was staring at her sister with the expression of someone who'd just discovered their childhood hero was actually a serial killer. Julia tried one last desperate play. This is emotional abuse. You're ganging up on me, humiliating me with private messages that were stolen from my workplace. I could probably sue Jake for this. Sue Jake? I laughed, and it came out bitter as black coffee. Julia, the only person who humiliated you is you. These aren't private love letters that got hacked. These are your boss and coworkers making fun of your marriage in a group chat. You turned our relationship into office entertainment. Linda finally spoke, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Julia, honey, is this true? Have you been with this man? Mom, it's complicated. You don't understand the pressure I'm under at work, the expectations. It's a yes or no question, I interrupted. Did you or didn't you sleep with Adrian? Julia's face crumpled. Not in a sad way. In a defeated way. The way people look when they realize their elaborate house of cards has finally collapsed, and there's no point in pretending the pile of cardboard was ever a real building. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she whispered. And there it was. Not an admission, exactly, but close enough. Linda sat down heavily on the hotel room's single chair. Brooke covered her face with her hands, and Julia started crying. Real tears this time. not the manipulative ones she'd been using for 3 days. I have a flight to catch, I said, zipping up my carry-on bag. My new life starts in about 4 hours, and I'm not missing it for any more of this drama. I handed Brooke the screenshots. Here, show these to whoever needs to see them. I'm done being the bad guy in my own marriage. As I walked toward the door, Linda called out one last time. Marcus, what do you want us to tell people? Tell them the truth, Linda. For once in this whole mess, just tell the truth. Landing at JFK felt like stepping through a portal into a parallel universe where I wasn't the punchline of my own life story. The moment I walked off that plane, breathing in air that didn't smell like broken dreams and other people's cologne, I knew I'd made the right choice. Hell, I should have made this choice months ago, but better late than never, right? The company car was waiting, an actual black sedan with my name on a placard, like I was some kind of executive instead of a guy who'd spent the last 72 hours discovering that his marriage was basically a reality TV show where everyone knew the plot twist except him. The driver, a cheerful Puerto Rican guy named Miguel, spent the ride into Manhattan giving me the unofficial tour. First time in the city? First time living here. I visited, but this is different. Yeah, man, it's always different when you're staying. You running towards something or away from something. I laughed, surprised by his directness. Little bit of both, I guess. Best kind of move. Fresh starts are good for the soul, you know? Miguel was right. As we crawled through the Lincoln Tunnel and emerged into the chaos of Midtown, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Excitement about my future. Not anxiety, not dread, not that sinking feeling of watching my life spiral down the drain while I stood there with a plunger. Actual honest-to-God excitement. The apartment was on the Upper West Side, 15 floors up with a view of Central Park that made my old place look like a closet with delusions of grandeur. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern kitchen, enough space to actually think without bumping into reminders of my failed marriage. It was furnished with that corporate housing aesthetic, clean, professional, and completely devoid of personality, which was exactly what I needed. I stood at those windows for 20 minutes, watching joggers and dog walkers navigate the park paths below, and realized this was the first time in months I'd looked at something without wondering what Julia was doing, where she was, or who she was with. The constant background anxiety that had become my normal had just evaporated. My phone buzzed with yet another text from Julia. She was up to about 50 unread messages at this point, but I didn't even glance at it. Whatever crisis she was manufacturing back home was no longer my problem to solve. Monday morning came with a wake-up call I'd almost forgotten existed. Genuine enthusiasm for work. I'd been going through the motions at my old job for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to actually give a damn about what I was doing. Harold had set up meetings with the entire regional team, and walking into that conference room felt like stepping into the major leagues. The team was sharp, motivated, and refreshingly drama-free. No one was sleeping with anyone else's spouse. No one was using group chats to mock their colleagues' personal lives, and everybody seemed to understand that working late meant actually working, not using the office as a cover story for extracurricular activities. Sarah, the marketing director, gave me the rundown on our biggest accounts. Mike from operations explained the logistics challenges we were facing. Jennifer from finance walked me through the budget projections that made my old salary look like pocket change. These were professionals who treated their careers like careers, not like elaborate schemes to justify infidelity. So what brought you to New York? Sarah asked during lunch. We were at some trendy place near the office where the sandwiches cost more than I used to spend on groceries, but the company was picking up the tab, so I was living large. Better opportunity, I said, which was true without being the whole truth. Sometimes you need a change of scenery to remember who you are. I get that. I moved here from Chicago 5 years ago. Best decision I ever made. There's something about this city that forces you to level up, you know? She was right. In the weeks since I'd arrived, I'd already started changing. Walking faster, thinking bigger, carrying myself like someone who belonged in rooms where important decisions got made. The version of Marcus who'd spent months heating up dinner alone while his wife screwed her boss felt like a character from someone else's life. Meanwhile, back in my old hometown, the fallout was apparently reaching nuclear levels. I'd been getting updates from Noah, who seemed to be enjoying the drama more than anyone should. Dude, Julia's life is imploding in real time. he told me during one of our check-in calls. She tried to go back to work Monday, but word about the screenshots had spread through the office like wildfire. Apparently, Adrian's wife found out too. Someone sent her copies of everything. His wife. Oh yeah, forgot to mention that. Adrian's married with 2 kids. His wife is some kind of lawyer, and from what I hear, she's not taking this development well. There are rumors about divorce papers and asset freezing and all kinds of legal nastiness. The irony was beautiful. Adrian, the smooth-talking boss who'd been using my marriage as entertainment, was about to discover what happens when your own spouse finds out you're a cheating piece of garbage. Julia, who'd thought she was trading up from her boring husband to some kind of corporate prince, had actually hitched her wagon to a married father who was about to lose everything in what sounded like a very expensive divorce. What about Julia? She's been staying with her mom, but Linda's apparently not thriving with the arrangement. Brooke told my cousin that there have been some epic screaming matches about responsibility and consequences and how Julia brought shame on the family. Very old-school Catholic guilt trip stuff. I should have felt bad for her. For years of marriage should have bought her some sympathy from me, even after everything. But all I felt was a distant sort of relief, like watching a car accident in your rearview mirror and realizing you'd gotten out of the way just in time. The city was working its magic on me. I was sleeping better, eating better, exercising regularly for the first time in years. I joined a gym near the office, started exploring different neighborhoods on weekends, even began thinking about what kind of person I wanted to be now that I wasn't defined by someone else's betrayal. 3 weeks in, Harold flew up from the home office to check on my progress. "You look different," he said as we sat in his hotel bar, sharing what he called a celebration drink for my successful transition. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like you're not carrying around someone else's problems anymore." "That's probably because I'm not." "Good. I was worried about you for a while there. Watching someone with your potential sabotage himself over a relationship that wasn't working was painful." "It wasn't that it wasn't working," I corrected him. "It was that only one of us was actually in the relationship. Hard to make something work when you're the only one trying." Harold raised his glass. "To new beginnings and better choices." "I'll drink to that." For the first time in months, I meant it. 2 months into my New York renaissance, I was having the kind of Tuesday that made me question why I'd ever lived anywhere else. Closed a major deal with a client in Tribeca, grabbed lunch at a place where celebrities casually ate salads next to normal humans, and was walking back to the office feeling like I'd finally figured out this whole successful adult thing when I spotted her. Julia, standing outside my office building like some kind of ghost from my past. Except ghosts usually have the decency to stay dead instead of showing up uninvited in your new life. She looked rough. That was the kindest way to put it. The polished, magazine cover version of Julia who used to spend 2 hours getting ready for her work meetings had been replaced by someone who looked like she'd been sleeping in her car and using gas station bathrooms for primping. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had that desperate energy that people get when their carefully constructed world collapses and they're scrambling to find someone to blame. "Marcus, we need to talk." "No, hello." "No, how are you?" No acknowledgement that showing up at someone's workplace unannounced after they've moved across the country to get away from you might be considered slightly psychotic behavior. Just straight to the demands, because apparently 4 years of marriage hadn't taught her anything about basic human courtesy. "Julia, what the hell are you doing here?" "I flew up this morning. We need to talk about us, about our marriage, about what we're throwing away." "Us? Our marriage? What we're throwing away?" The audacity was almost impressive. She was talking like this was some mutual decision we'd made together, instead of the natural consequence of her spending 3 months screwing her boss while turning my personal life into office entertainment. "There is no us, Julia. There is no our marriage. You made sure of that when you decided Adrian was more interesting than your husband." She looked around nervously, probably realizing that having this conversation on a busy Manhattan sidewalk wasn't her smartest move. "Can we go somewhere private? There are things I need to explain, things you don't understand about what really happened." Against every instinct screaming at me to walk away, I agreed to coffee. Not because I wanted to hear her explanations. I'd seen enough screenshots to know exactly what had happened, but because some masochistic part of me was curious to see how she planned to spin this disaster into something that wasn't entirely her fault. We went to a Starbucks 2 blocks away, the kind of anonymous corporate space where you could have life-altering conversations surrounded by people who didn't give a shit about your drama. Julia ordered some complicated drink with extra shots and alternative milk, because apparently, even in the middle of her personal apocalypse, she couldn't just get a regular coffee like a normal human being. Marcus, I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But it wasn't what you think it was. Really? Because what I think is that you spent 3 months having an affair with your married boss, while making me look like an idiot to everyone we know. Which part of that is incorrect? She flinched like I'd slapped her, which was rich considering she'd spent weeks emotionally bludgeoning me with lies and manipulation. Adrian and I, it was complicated. He was my mentor, and he made me feel important, like my ideas mattered. You were always so busy with your own stuff, and I felt invisible in our marriage. My own stuff? You mean like the job I was considering leaving for a massive promotion that you convinced me to turn down twice? That stuff. I didn't know about New York until. You didn't know because you never asked. You were too busy planning your next late-night strategy session to give a damn about my career or my life or anything that didn't revolve around you and Adrian's twisted little office romance. She started crying then, the kind of calculated tears that she'd always used when she wanted to end an argument without actually addressing the issues. Manipulation disguised as vulnerability, emotional blackmail wrapped up in victim cosplay. I thought you'd always forgive me, she whispered. I thought you were too passive to ever actually leave. I took you for granted, and I know that was wrong. But people make mistakes, Marcus. For years of marriage has to count for something. There it was. The truth she'd been dancing around for 2 months. She'd been counting on my passivity, banking on the fact that I'd be too weak or too loyal or too stupid to call her on her bullshit. I'd been her safety net while she explored other options. The reliable backup plan she could return to when her exciting affair inevitably imploded. You're right, Julia. People do make mistakes. But what you did wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. You chose Adrian over me, every single night for 3 months. You chose to lie to me, to humiliate me, to treat our marriage like an inconvenience you had to work around. But I choose you now. I'm here, aren't I? I'm trying to fix this. You're here because Adrian dumped you when his wife found out, and his life started falling apart. You're here because your backup plan moved to New York and you're scrambling to find someone to pay your bills and stroke your ego. This isn't about choosing me. This is about damage control. She was full-on sobbing now, attracting stares from other customers who were probably wondering if they should call security or just enjoy the free entertainment. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her, no residual love trying to convince me to give her another chance. What if I'm pregnant? She blurted out, playing what she clearly thought was her trump card. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud in the middle of Starbucks while my soon-to-be ex-wife claimed to be carrying my child. The absurdity was too much to handle with any kind of dignity. Julia, we haven't had sex in 2 months. And before that, it was maybe once every few weeks when you weren't too tired from your work commitments. If you're pregnant, congratulations. It's either the second coming of Christ or Adrian's problem. Her face crumpled, and I realized she'd just admitted to lying about something that could have changed my entire life. Even in her desperation, she couldn't resist trying to manipulate me with fake emergencies and manufactured crises. I needed you to care. I needed you to fight for me. I did care, Julia. For 4 years, I cared more about your happiness than my own success, more about your comfort than my own career, more about saving our marriage than saving my dignity. I cared right up until the moment I realized you'd never cared about me at all. I stood up, leaving her crying into her overpriced latte like the star of her own tragic drama. Enjoy New York, Julia. Try not to sleep with any married guys while you're here. Walking away from that coffee shop felt like closing the final chapter of the worst book I'd ever read. I had a life to get back to, a real life with actual opportunities and genuine relationships with people who didn't think loyalty was a character flaw. Julia could keep the drama. I was done being part of the cast. Life has a twisted sense of humor, and nowhere was that more apparent than in the cosmic comedy that unfolded over the next few months. While I was building my new life in Manhattan, better apartment, better job, better everything, Adrian's world was crashing down like a house of cards in a hurricane. And honestly, I had front row seats to the most satisfying shit show I'd ever witnessed. The first sign that karma was sharpening her claws came about 3 weeks after Julia's pathetic coffee shop ambush. I was at a networking event in Midtown, the kind of corporate mixer where people in expensive suits drink overpriced wine and pretend to care about each other's quarterly projections. I was actually enjoying myself. Shocking, I know, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Marcus Coleman? Jesus, what are the odds? I turned around to find myself face to face with Tony Ricci, a guy I'd known back in college who'd somehow become a hotshot marketing executive. We'd kept in loose touch over the years, the kind of LinkedIn connection that exists purely for professional networking and the occasional happy birthday message. Tony, what brings you to the big city? Just transferred here from Chicago. Got offered a position I couldn't refuse. He grinned and took a sip of his wine. Actually, funny story, I'm working for the same company your ex-wife does. Well, it's a small world, right? My blood went cold. Oh man, you don't know? Julia got canned about 2 weeks ago. Whole thing was a disaster. Apparently, she was having an affair with some executive, and when his wife found out, she went nuclear. Hired a private investigator, got evidence of company resources being used for personal activities. Hotel rooms charged to corporate accounts, that kind of thing. The wine in my glass suddenly tasted like victory with hints of cosmic justice. The guy, Adrian something, got transferred here to New York, but his reputation followed him like a bad smell. Word travels fast in this industry, and apparently, everyone knows he's the boss who sleeps with his employees. Not exactly the kind of guy you want leading your team, you know? I nearly choked on my drink. Adrian's here? In New York? Yeah, started about a month ago. Poor bastard thought a change of scenery would help, but turns out you can't outrun your own stupidity. His wife cleaned him out in the divorce, took the house, the kids, half his 401k, and enough alimony to fund a small country. Guy went from corner office to studio apartment real quick. The universe was apparently running a special on poetic justice, and Adrian was getting the full package deal. Over the next few weeks, I started hearing Adrian's name pop up in the most delightful contexts. New York's marketing scene was smaller then. People realized, and Adrian's reputation had preceded him like a warning label on toxic waste. At industry mixers, people would literally turn away when he approached. At business lunches, conversations would die when he walked by. The man had become a professional pariah, and he'd earned every bit of it. The best part? He was working for a mid-tier agency now, nothing like the prestigious firm he'd left behind. His new position was basically a lateral move disguised as a demotion, and from what I heard through the grapevine, his new colleagues treated him like he had a contagious disease. Nobody wanted to be associated with the guy who destroyed his marriage and career for some employee's wife. Melissa, Adrian's ex-wife, had gone full scorched earth during their divorce proceedings. She'd not only taken him to the cleaners financially, but had also made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly why their marriage had ended. Screenshots of his group chat messages had somehow found their way to school parent groups, country club committees, and professional associations. The man couldn't grab coffee without running into someone who knew he was a cheating douchebag. But the real cherry on top of this Karma Sunday came at a charity auction in Soho about 4 months after my coffee encounter with Julia. I was there representing my company, bidding on some art for the office and generally enjoying the kind of high-end networking event that came with my new position. The crowd was the usual mix of corporate executives, tech entrepreneurs, and people who had more money than sense. I was examining a sculpture that probably cost more than my old annual salary when I felt someone approach from behind. I turned around, and there he was, Adrian Martinez, looking like someone had put him through a blender set to life lessons. Gone was the polished executive who'd once bragged about hotel receipts in group chats. This version of Adrian looked tired, desperate, and about 10 years older than his actual age. His suit was nice, but not expensive. His confidence was nowhere to be found, and he had that defeated posture that comes with being professionally and personally destroyed. "Marcus," he said, and I could hear the forced casualness in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you here. Adrian, how's New York treating you?" His smile was about as convincing as a $3 bill. "Can't complain. New city, new opportunities, you know how it is." "Oh, I know exactly how it is. Fresh starts are amazing when you actually deserve them." He flinched, and I realized he knew that I knew everything. The screenshots, the group chats, the hotel receipts. the whole sordid mess that had turned his life into a cautionary tale about workplace affairs. Look, Marcus, about what happened back home. What about it? I think there were some misunderstandings, some things that got blown out of proportion. Maybe we could grab a drink sometime, clear the air? The audacity was breathtaking. This guy had spent months mocking me in group chats, bragging about screwing my wife, and turning my marriage into office entertainment. And now he wanted to grab drinks and clear the air like we were old buddies who'd had some minor disagreement about sports teams. You know what, Adrian? I think the air is pretty clear already. Crystal clear, actually. Come on, man. We're both professionals. No reason we can't bury the hatchet and move forward. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw exactly what he was. A middle-aged man who destroyed his own life for a few months of excitement and was now desperately trying to convince himself that his catastrophic choices were somehow everyone else's fault. You're right, I said. There's no reason we can't move forward. The difference is, I already have. You buried yourself, Adrian. I don't need to bury anything. His face went pale, and I could see the exact moment he realized that I wasn't going to help him rehabilitate his image or pretend his actions hadn't destroyed multiple lives. I walked away, leaving him standing there with his fake smile and his desperate networking attempts. Watching Adrian's fall hadn't been the goal. It had just been a pleasant side effect of choosing myself over a toxic situation. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well while your enemies destroy themselves. 6 months into my New York chapter, I was living the kind of life that people write motivational Instagram posts about. Corner office with a view of the Hudson, bank account that didn't give me anxiety attacks, and a social calendar that didn't revolve around wondering where my spouse was spending the night. But the real victory wasn't the professional success or the financial security. It was waking up every morning without that knot of dread in my stomach that had been my constant companion during the final months of my marriage. The updates from my old life came through Noah, who'd apparently appointed himself as my personal war correspondent for the ongoing disaster that was Julia's existence. And let me tell you, the reports were more entertaining than anything Netflix had to offer. Dude, you're not going to believe this latest development, Noah said during one of our weekly check-ins. Julia's dating her personal trainer now. Of course she is. Let me guess. He's got abs you could wash laundry on and the emotional intelligence of a golden retriever. Bingo. Guy's name is Chad, because of course it is, and he's exactly the kind of meathead who thinks protein powder is a food group. But here's the kicker. He's already cheating on her. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. Julia, who destroyed her marriage by cheating with her boss, was now getting cheated on by a guy whose idea of intellectual conversation probably involved comparing pre-workout supplements. Karma wasn't just knocking on her door, it had kicked the door down and was redecorating the entire house. She caught him with some Instagram influencer who does those fitness videos in bikinis. Apparently, Julia walked into the gym unannounced and found them in a very non-professional training session. The meltdown was legendary, screaming, throwing weights, threatening to sue the gym for emotional trauma. They banned her for life. I should have felt some sympathy for her. For years of marriage should have earned her at least a moment of pity when her new relationship imploded the same way ours had. But all I felt was a distant sense of cosmic balance being restored. The financial karma was even better. Turns out, Julia's little tax evasion scheme, keeping her parents' address to claim benefits she wasn't entitled to, had finally caught up with her. The IRS doesn't have a sense of humor about fraud, even the small-scale variety, and they'd hit her with penalties and back taxes that wiped out what little savings she'd managed to accumulate. She had to move back in with Linda and Brooke, Noah continued. 3 grown women in a 2-bedroom apartment, and from what I hear, it's about as peaceful as a cage fight between rabid badgers. Linda's been giving her the guilt trip of the century about bringing shame on the family, and Brooke's been playing amateur therapist, trying to get Julia to acknowledge her destructive patterns. The mental image of Julia, the woman who'd once complained about our apartment being too small, crammed into her childhood bedroom while her mother lectured her about responsibility and consequences, was almost too good to be true. But the real plot twist came a month later, when Brooke reached out to me directly. Marcus, I know you probably don't want to hear from any of us, but I thought you should know that Julia's been asking about you. She says she's in therapy now, working on herself, and she's sorry for everything that happened. That's great for her, Brooke. I hope she finds whatever she's looking for. She was wondering if maybe, once she gets her life together, you might consider. No. You don't even know what I was going to ask. Yes, I do. And the answer is no. To all of it. Julia burned that bridge, salted the earth, and then nuked the entire landscape. There's no going back, no second chances, no working things out. I'm done. Brooke was quiet for a moment. She really is different now. The therapy seems to be helping, and she's starting to understand how badly she hurt you. Good for her. Personal growth is important. But it doesn't undo 4 years of taking me for granted, 3 months of cheating, and weeks of lying to my face while her boss made jokes about my marriage. I'm glad she's getting help, but her healing journey doesn't include me. That conversation was liberating in a way I hadn't expected. For months, I'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Julia to find some new way to disrupt my peace or drag me back into her drama. But hearing myself say those words out loud, hearing how final and certain they sounded, made me realize I was truly done. Not angry done or hurt done, but actually, completely, peacefully done. My 6-month performance review came with another raise and the offer to make my New York position permanent. Harold flew up from the home office to deliver the news personally, and we celebrated at a steakhouse that probably cost more per meal than I used to spend on groceries in a week. You know, Marcus, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've never seen someone bounce back from a personal crisis the way you have. Most people would still be wallowing in self-pity or trying to win their ex back. You just moved on. Sometimes the best thing you can do is cut your losses and bet on yourself instead of waiting for other people to figure out your worth. Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The company's taking notice, and there are bigger opportunities coming down the pipeline. But the biggest opportunity hadn't come from work. It had come from the most unexpected place of all. 3 weeks earlier, I'd met Leah at a bookstore in Brooklyn. She was an editor at a small publishing house, had a laugh that made me forget my own name, and possessed the revolutionary quality of being exactly who she claimed to be. Our first date was coffee that turned into dinner that turned into a 6-hour conversation about everything and nothing. Our second date was a comedy show in the village where she laughed at my terrible jokes and made better ones of her own. By the third date, I realized I'd forgotten what it felt like to be with someone who actually wanted to be there. Leah didn't work late with mysterious bosses. She didn't have secret group chats where she mocked my existence. She didn't treat our relationship like an inconvenience to be managed around her real priorities. She was just present, honest, real. You know what I like about you? She said one evening as we walked through Central Park, the same park I could see from my apartment windows. My devastating good looks and humble personality? Your peace. You've got this calm confidence, like you know who you are and you're comfortable with it. It's attractive as hell. Peace. That wasn't a word anyone would have used to describe me a year ago. A year ago, I was the guy who heated up dinner alone while his wife screwed her boss. The guy who turned down life-changing opportunities to accommodate someone else's lies. The guy who was so afraid of being alone that he stayed in a relationship that was slowly killing him from the inside. Standing there in Central Park with Leah, looking up at the skyline of a city that had given me back my life, I realized that Julia had been right about one thing. If I couldn't trust her working late with her boss, we shouldn't have been together. She was absolutely right. And choosing myself had been the best decision I'd ever made.